Woo! Our long night continues. Part 3 of our evening of the No Name Cinema Society. Our 17th meeting since we started back in February. And this is part 3 where we're going to talk about a classic movie. Hello, my name is Jonathan Betzler, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. This is our third portion of the evening, and quite frankly, it's one of our more popular segments of the evening is when we turn back the clock a little bit and look back at some of the films from cinema history. Films that I host these screening groups in New York and LA. That films that we have experienced in these screening groups, we're bringing to you guys now. We're not bringing them to you, but we're going to talk about them anyway. So that's kind of fun. First, let me introduce my compatriots. This is Dave Joseph. He is strangely sober.
Yeah, it happens sometimes.
Davey Joe, how are you feeling about the evening so far?
It's going well. It's going well.
Do you mean that, or are you just trying to make me feel better?
Did it work?
Did what work?
Do you feel better?
Oh, no. J Money, how do you feel?
I feel better. It worked for me.
Oh, you feel better? All right, so tonight's film is the 1975 film Shampoo, directed by Hal Ashby, written by Robert Towne, who, as I mentioned in the last broadcast, also wrote Chinatown, which is a film that came up during our last broadcast when we talked about Chinatown and the Philadelphia story. So, maybe we'll get into the screenwriting a little bit. And also starring and produced by Warren Beatty. Also in the film, Julie Christie, Goldie Hawn, Jack Warden, and Lee Grant, who won an Oscar for her performance as Best Supporting Actress of the Year in 1975. Shampoo is in Shampoo. Warren Beatty plays a Beverly Hills hairdresser who basically weaves and sort of his journey about how he weaves through L.A., navigating both his clients and his sexual partners, who are frequently the same people. So does that sum it up for you guys?
That nails it.
That's perfect.
Davey Joe, you good?
I'm good.
Davey Joe? Just not.
Yep, that's great. That is great.
So, anyway, this is comical. So we screened this film in this room in July of this past year. So we had a nice group for that. But for you guys, was it the first time you were watching it?
It was for me.
Yeah, it definitely was for me.
All right, while you're unmuted there, David Joe, why don't you start us off then? What'd you think?
I was not in the mood to watch this, and I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I really don't like to like all three movies, but that's the way it worked out this time.
Damn.
It's a really fun movie.
J Money.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that I'm surprised by how much I ended up liking it. I think that I had maybe heard what it was about, which was wrong, and I've just been under misconception the whole time. But I liked it.
Well, the group and I are gonna. Usually, we are very much pushing for these. We're the supporters of these classics, but we're gonna have a discussion, I guess, this time. And you guys have both seen it more recently than I did because it was July, and for some reason, I don't remember a lot of it, but I do know that the group was put off by the film. They didn't know what to make of it, and had a real hard time, getting a stranglehold on it. I think, it left them cold, and I was sort of on board with that. And I think I liked it even less than they did. I think that there was some confusion. A week later, somebody came up to me and said, who was at the screening, we had a couple at the screening, and they had said that they, for the whole week after the screening, they actually couldn't stop talking about it, even though they initially didn't like it very much. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So there might be something to that, like a sort of a second viewing type thing. But this is something that they said to me, not too long ago. They sent me a text. I'm just going to read it because it's actually kind of long. Or I mean, it's hard to summarize, is what I mean. They said they realized, now that they think about how gender roles in it were inextricably linked with constructs of class and power, and the purposeful patheticness of a character more typically shown as an invulnerable. So that was something that came up. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that I'd always been under the impression from whatever I'd heard about Shampoo before this was that it was kind of a fluff piece for Warren Beatty in the 70s. And at the end of the day, watching it, what I was struck by was that it really wasn't so much about fluff as it was about farce and also satire. It was a strongly satirical piece that was even, sort of tipped in political satire as well as cultural satire. So I thought that was interesting.
I agree there was a satirical piece, and I agree they tried to shoehorn politics into it.
Well, I don't know if they tried to shoehorn it. I think that it was kind of rolled up into the period that they were talking about just to begin by default. I think it's rolled up into the late 60s, so I feel like it felt like it was really directly tied to pop culture in that sense as well.
Well, I mean, I think it was specifically about the Nixon being elected, from a vantage point, like the audience knowing what is going to happen to the Nixon presidency,
right.
But the characters not. So, I mean, I think that was sort of what was, being suggested there.
Yeah.
And I agree that it was trying to be satire, but the word that I'll take issue with is strong satire. I mean, like, I think it was a weak satire.
Well, I guess I would go back to what your friend just said. The character, Warren Beatty's character, is a character that we don't really end up celebrating as much as sort of watch deteriorate. And I think that's a really strong part of the satire in this situation.
How so?
Because I think that this movie was mocking a certain, stereotype from that time period, and also a certain stereotype of a man from that time period. And I think that, in other circumstances, Beatty's character could have been much more broadly celebrated for the way that he was, sort of being portrayed in this movie. He could have been much more seen as an adventurous, gregarious, kind of just, swinging, happening kind of guy. But I think at the end, the way that the movie itself kind of takes a left turn towards the very end, we end up seeing how he's sort of crumbling under his own deceit in how he feels about himself. And I think that shows through the satire of his character.
Well, it's almost everyone feels that same way about themselves in the film. It almost feels like they all have this sort of self-loathing, and as a result, that hatred for themselves makes them feel enough pain that they go about hurting each other.
Yeah, but I do think that there were certain characters, and I guess they're really more side characters, that kind of break through it by the end of the movie.
How so?
Well, I don't think that everybody ended up being a train wreck. I think that there were people that went through.
I didn't say train wreck necessarily.
No, but I am. I guess what I would say is that there were, I would say that Beatty ends up being a train wreck, whereas I would say Princess Goldie Hawn goes through a process where she sort of discovers something about herself, and hopefully that's leading in a better opportunity for her.
I'll give you Goldie Hawn. David Joe, you've been quiet.
Yeah, the thing that I liked about the movie is there were a couple of big laughs, at least for me in this movie, and I think that they revolved around the amazing unawareness of some of these male characters. The one that I'm blanking on the rich guy, his name.
It's been since July, but Jack Warden is the actor. So let's go with that.
So he's talking to Warren Beatty, and he's like, what's she angry about? Like, well, I mean, you've got a mistress in an apartment that you're paying for, and she's well aware of it. It's just like things like that. Warren Beatty. Goldie Hawn shows up and he's like, "Oh, hey, I've been looking for you. Where you been?" I don't know. I thought that the movie did a good job of kind of creating these crazy situations and really kind of complicated, sort of the stars aligning, everyone being in the right place at the right time it seemed to me to be a kind of a good piece of writing, and just it was very interesting to me.
Well, I don't deny that it's interesting. I'll give you that. But I mean, like, here's my issue of many. I feel like, yes, I mean, I feel like it wanted to talk about gender roles, for sure. I mean, like, and I think it likes, I think we can talk a little bit and compare this to Saturday Night Fever in a lot of ways. When we talk about Saturday Night Fever, we talked about representations of the 70s male psyche, and even though this takes place in 1968, I think it is, more about the 70s male in that regard. But it also, it wanted to talk about politics a little bit. It wanted to talk about social mores. It wanted to talk about Los Angeles in its own kind of way. It wanted to talk about class structure, and the result is it's a mess. I mean, I think it's just too muddled. It's repetitive. It's meandering, and ultimately, as a result, uninteresting. I think all those things can be accomplished with something with a little more momentum. I mean, I just feel like the screenplay sort of takes us all over the place, and like the creatives involved in this, did not get along with each other, or they respected each other, but they're just so different. Like, Town and Beatty were fighting the whole time, and Beatty's not director, but he basically directed because Hal Ashby's just a real nice guy that was high most of the time, and and got overruled by Town and Beatty, who are big Type A personalities. And so the result is it's like lots of different type of movies. Let's talk about tone. We talk about tone all the time as being the director's responsibility, and I feel like when times where I wanted the satire, I got slapstick, and I think about Jack Warden. Being at that party of younger people, a scene that could have been really effective in many different ways, and talking, I mean, like, showing how this big, powerful man is reduced to just one of the other people, at this party, and he misses that, it's something he wants to be a part of, even though he's not important anymore. There's a lot going on there. It's the execution. The ideas are there. And I think that's what you guys are responding to. Maybe not Davy Joe. I don't know what Davy Joe is responding to. But I mean, I think that's what you're responding to is the ideas. But I mean, like, my general feeling is the execution wasn't there. It was ultimately meandering and boring.
I don't know if I give that kind of thing a free pass in this situation because of the distance between now and this movie. Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying. It definitely did meander, or I guess I would say it ambled. Right, it strutted. I don't know if I would say necessarily. I guess it didn't bother me per se because I guess I wasn't surprised that it did, and I don't know if it's because I expect that from this kind of movie from this time period, or I did that, or if I just didn't. It just didn't bother me. I don't know. It's almost like I wonder if this movie actually holds up better now than it did when it came out, because I feel like when it came out, it might have been a little too on the nose. Whereas for me, part of the reason I think I enjoyed the experience so much was because I was taken by surprise by how much it seemed to be self-aware of what it was talking about. It seemed to be very self-aware about skewering these kind of ridiculous individuals. I wasn't expecting that. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, that it took a while to get places, and it probably took a little too long in a lot of ways. But I wasn't unhappy to be along for the trip. I was always fine being along the road with it. So that didn't bother me. I didn't find it I didn't find it all over the place in terms of tone either. I guess I felt like tonally it all held together in pretty much the same way for me. So I'm kind of curious as to why you felt like the execution of the party scene, for instance, broke down so much.
Well, I mean, that's just one example because it just felt like Jack Warden was kind of an actor I generally like. I felt like he was kind of broad in that scene, and overplaying this fish out of water concept. And there was something like corny drug jokes and things, as I recall. And I mean, like, I think when Davy Joe brought up the big laughs that he talked about, the things that he really liked. Those are the things that don't seem to work in this movie. Like that, those are the sort of things that, I mean, like, what I think this movie wanted to be is more of like a cerebral, like, oh, smile, that's kind of clever, or like, I see what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even think they were being like really. They wanted to be that funny in the sense because of what they were trying to suggest. But to what you were saying about audiences of the time, this was the fourth highest grossing film of 1975. Behind Jaws and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and one more that I can't remember off the top of my head. So audiences of 1975 were responding to it, at least with their pocketbooks. But that might very well be a part of its promiscuity. I think had something to do with that. Like that's one of the things that they sold, and also this idea that you know, like the tabloids would sort of promote it as autobiographical to some degree, and I'm sure that there's that element to it, because quite frankly, you know, there are times when I found the film masturbatory, so I mean, I think audiences maybe were interested. Oh, is this what life is really like for Warren Beatty? You know, sleeping with Carly Simon, and I mean, quite frankly, he also dated Goldie Hawn and Julie Christie before this movie. Like, he's working with two of his ex-girlfriends here.
Sure.
So the meta aspect, I think, was a draw to audiences.
But do you feel like that threw off everything? I mean, I guess I don't. I feel like those are things that all added to it as opposed to subtracted to the process.
I think it should be moot. I don't think those exterior factors should.
Well, I don't know. I think that
unless you feel like the energy and the scenes between Julie Christie and Warren Beatty were heightened in some way.
Well, maybe they were. I don't know. I don't have a context, but I guess I also feel like if this is a satire that at least involves, you know, Hollywood culture to some degree, which it does, then it's kind of funny that they also involve the real story behind it. I mean, to me, that's an extra layer that makes it a little bit more interesting. I guess I wouldn't say that I thought it was laugh out loud funny. I don't know if there were really parts that I literally laughed out loud at, like Davie Joe was talking about. So maybe because I didn't find it extraordinarily funny, I didn't find the tone to be as uneven as you did either. I guess I would say overall it was amusing. I was amused by the whole thing, but I don't know if I necessarily thought of it as a comedy, for instance.
All right, let's talk a little bit about. We don't have a lot of time left. I've got a lot of topics here. Let's talk a little bit about the performances. What do you guys think?
Hand it to Davie Joe.
Davie?
I mean, I thought the performances were great. I mean, great. They were fine. I don't. This is not a movie that I think of as being anyone standing out or being memorable. You said someone won an Academy Award for this?
Yeah.
That's kind of surprising to me. I mean, nothing really stood out. No one was bad, but I don't know.
Do you know which one?
I know who won the Academy Award.
J Money?
You said it was Lee Grant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one. Look at the photo.
Yeah, no, I see the photo. Okay, well, I mean, she was fine. I don't know. Are you not surprised by that?
I mean, like, I don't think it. I mean, it was fine. It was a fine performance. It didn't detract for me the way that the performances of Jack Warden and Warren Beatty detracted for me. I've always had a thing against Warren Beatty, which is why I'm glad you guys didn't make me do a top 5 of Warren Beatty films. I'm not a huge fan. I don't think he's a very strong actor. I think, you know, he was forcing things. It was interesting. I actually thought he forced the mumble. Like I think he like was. I felt like he was like forcing himself to mumble sometimes in a way that instead of it coming from the character, my sense was it was coming from his own idea that this idea of mumbling is in, you know, at the time. So I think that it didn't necessarily feel a part of George, and so it didn't. It felt sort of like an outwardly in choice instead of vice versa. Sorry for shaking the monitor there. I liked Goldie Hawn actually, Goldie Hawn who had won an Oscar before this movie, but the rest of the performances I found rather. I mean, Julie Christie was fine, Lee Grant was fine, not detracting, but also not impressive in any way. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to get a sense of if you thought, you know, Lee Grant was Oscar deserving or any of the performances.
No, she wasn't. I mean, I don't have the context of who was up against her, but
she was up against two people from Nashville, Lily Tomlin and Renee Blakely, and she was up against Brenda Vaccaro for a film called Jacqueline Suzanne Is Not Enough, which is Jacqueline Suzanne's Once Is Not Enough, I think it's called. And so yeah, she didn't have a lot of competition. I forget who the 5th nominee was. I think it might have been the year of Sylvia Miles was nominated. I don't know if you remember Sylvia Miles. She had this voice to talk like that. Sylvia Miles, old lady. She was nominated for a film called Farewell, My Lovely. So not much competition, I grant you, for Lee Grant.
Yeah. Kind of
See what I did there, Lee Grant competition? Grant, you?
That was,
Oh, never mind.
that was impressive.
J Money has to weigh in about performances.
I guess I'm going to echo a lot of what you guys are saying. Although I don't necessarily have a problem with Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty's never really struck me as a great actor either way. He's in memorable roles, but I think that he's also disappeared from memorable roles for a reason. I don't feel like he's kind of held up. And I think that he was maybe suited for this role because of a lot of ways about his mystique to begin with. And I didn't find his performance distracting in any way. It seemed like it actually fit fairly well for me, but nobody really stood out for being an incredible actor for what they were given. But I also don't feel like there was maybe an opportunity for that either. I really enjoyed Goldie Hawn's performance, certainly. Would I have given her an Oscar nomination? I don't think so, but maybe. Even whatever was also
Let's talk about these female characters. Let's talk about these female characters for a second. One thing that came up in the screening is, it's like these female characters were two-dimensional on purpose. Sort of representing three different ages of the same person.
Sure.
So what do you think? What do you think that do you buy that? And if so, what do you think that says about women in the 1970s, or in this case late 60s? But again, I really feel like, in spite of where it takes place, it's satirizing the 70s. I feel strongly about that. And I think you guys are on board with that.
Yeah, but I guess I felt like this was more about the sexual politics of power than about just sexual politics in general. I guess I thought it was more about people that were struggling to find positions of power in this kind of crazy Hollywood setting.
I agree with that. But what about this? What is it saying about the female gender roles? Given the characterizations of the three main women.
Well, but I guess what I'm saying is that, I might agree with your assessment that they were all two-dimensional, but then I thought all the male characters were two-dimensional as well. I thought all the characters were relatively two-dimensional.
I agree with all that as well, but I have a very specific question that I'm asking.
I know, but I'm saying it's not commenting on that specific aspect. It's commenting on people in general.
And I'm asking, the thing that I actually said is that they're the same person at three different ages. That each female character is representing same person split up, into three different ages. And so what I'm asking is, what does that say about, the females in the 1970s, or the female roles, the role of the gender? Davey, give me something, because J Money is just ignoring the question.
Well, I think that, I'm gonna kind of punt a little bit also, because I think that basically what it said to me was that this guy found three similar women that he was attracted to and caught them at three different stages of their lives. I didn't necessarily think that it was making.
I'm going to stop you right there. You get the impression that he's attracted to them all. Women.
Well, yeah.
That he's attracted to, other than they're attracted to him.
Well, yeah. He's definitely an opportunity.
Don't you get the impression?
Well,
you could look at it that way. But at the same time, he very rarely turns anyone down.
Well, can you say four women, since the daughter was there also?
You could. Carrie Fisher in a small role, Star Wars. But he doesn't turn anyone down. So what is that? What does that represent, you think?
Well, that I think.
Because I don't think there's anything special about. If there's anything special, it's about Julie Christie, right?
Yes.
Although I think the only thing that really is special about her is that she's at the right age.
I agree. That's.
Guys, you there?
Okay, so I don't think it was just about age in that situation. I think it was about her being a seasoned veteran of the scene in the same way that he kind of was. There was a sense to his character that I got, at least, that by the end of it, he was kind of exhausted by everything that he had been doing. As much as he felt like he was part of, maybe the larger picture, as part of the machine, if you will. He had to continue doing this because he felt like that's what was the key to the success. But I felt like by the end of it, they were both commiserating. Right. They were torn up from going through this process, and that's what he saw in her. He saw himself. He could empathize with her, and that was the first thing he could do, because he doesn't empathize with any of the other women he's attracted to. He's just attracted to them. He just sees them as opportunities. Right.
Well, and he does suggest that he enjoys it. At one point, he says, "I don't fuck for money. I fuck for fun," or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure. He enjoys it. feels like a very shallow endeavor for him, right? It doesn't really, it's not like he, of course it's enjoyable. It's just that it's also not necessarily something that you get a lot out of. There's no depth to it necessarily.
But that was, I think, a bit of foreshadowing in that it showed that he did take offense and he was a bit jealous. So I guess, you could sort of see that he was going to ultimately fall for her, and he does, for real, at the end of the movie. So there was something there. I mean, I think he was it was foreshadowing his growing a conscience and a heart.
Yeah. Right.
Wait,
so
Davey.
We don't have a lot of time left. I want to get to the showdown.
Well, Davey, if you pose the question, you have to have an answer, right? I mean, you must have an opinion about what the answer is to the question you asked.
Which question at this point? I mean,
what about whether or not you thought the three characters represented different, periods of time in a woman's life in the 70s? I guess.
I don't know for sure. I mean, like I think it suggests, that there's the I don't know. I mean, I would really like to ask a woman, quite frankly, but I mean, I think what it suggests is that the dilemma of many women in this concept of, or at least the 70s woman, where women are becoming more sexually open.
Sure.
But at the same time, some of them hold on to a lot of the social expectations, before becoming sexually more open, and the dilemma that it causes for them, in the sense that, they feel like they should be having sex, but they still have this emotional attachment to it, and everyone's this is a world pre-STDs, and so what is this? They feel like they can be free and it's fun, but then they have these expectations, and so they're trying to weigh the balance there as they're discovering open sexuality, but at the same time not enjoying every aspect of it. I don't know if I articulated that right. I know where my mind's going.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's interesting about this movie is that everybody is having is having fun, quote unquote. Like, they're all supposedly enjoying these sort of gregarious situations, but they're all miserable. They're all really depressed people. I mean, even Carrie Fisher is like the most depressed daughter in the world. Like, they're all empowered by the, but they also have no idea what they're doing with it.
Right, and I think it's interesting that it takes place over the course of a single day. I think it is very unrealistic, and maybe this is part of the satire, that he would have sex with that many. He can't possibly physically have sex with that many people in a 24-hour period. I just want to be very clear about that.
It's Warren Beatty.
But not George. Yeah, so that is a fantasy in of itself, I can tell you, because I've tried. With that in mind, and I also want to say to our viewers, we've got a lot of viewers right now. We're very excited by this. Feel free to comment on Facebook or on YouTube. I keep refreshing over here to see if. And now I'm looking at myself, looking at the YouTube page, so that's kind of trippy. But feel free to make comments here, YouTube, Facebook. If you have questions or comments, we're happy to answer them. One more topic before we get to the showdown, and that is I want to ask about this male psyche idea, because we talked about Saturday Night Fever. When it comes to the representations of the male psyche, I almost did a top 5 based on that. That was one of the discussed top 5s coming up in the freeform segment later tonight. What is it saying about the male psyche? Like, and how does it compare to what Saturday Night Fever says about the male psyche? I'd love to keep this short, but it's a big topic. Davey Joe, do you want to go first? I doubt it, but I'm going to make you try.
What does it say about the male psyche? In the
70s specifically, like the 70s male, like what representations of the 70s male, and how does George and Jack Warden, what are they reflecting in the needs and desires of the general 70s male?
Well, I think that it portrays the 70s male as not necessarily being the most thoughtful, sensitive people.
Well, it is the me generation, right? That's what they call the 70s, the me generation.
Yeah, and I guess it just sort of shows the selfishness but it also, I think, I think to tie it back to Saturday Night Fever, it shows that ultimately there's a toll to be paid for that kind of behavior, and both of the main characters in those movies, by the end of the movie, they feel terrible about themselves, or at least frustrated with their position.
Well, at least one of them feels like you feel like one of them is going to change. But then again, I saw the sequel Staying Alive, so I don't know if how successful he is at that. J Money, I have some thoughts, but you go.
Well, I guess what I would say is that between this movie and Saturday Night Fever, Saturday Night Fever really to me talked a lot more about machismo and sort of like how that might play into.
But wouldn't you say this is the sexuality, particularly in the Beverly Hills world, isn't that a form of machismo, a different kind, like
a different kind,
an upper class machismo almost? Like your social structure is based on how many people you've taken to bed, not how many people you've beat up. I mean, it's similar but different at the same time. But I mean, I think there's a parallel there.
Oh, there's definitely a parallel there. The difference is, to me, Saturday Night Fever. I keep wanting to say Saturday Night Live Fever. Saturday Night Fever is about young development of sexuality and about young development of machismo and about figuring out where you're going to go in life. Whereas I think that Shampoo is already about somebody that had already reached a certain point in life and was kind of coasting through on the machismo. It's almost like I could see an extension of John Travolta's character from Saturday Night Fever ending up in Beverly Hills in that sort of scenario. I feel like if he had never really progressed, it would have been there. But I also feel like
and it also I think it shows that nothing changes much, between age 20 and 40 in that regard.
Right. But what I do think that Shampoo was showing was there was the changing tide and what machismo meant for two different generations, because there was Warren Beatty and then there was I'm sorry,
Jack Warden. Jack Warden character. Yeah.
So they were really two different opposite ends of what was, Jack Warden was what was traditionally, considered sort of the male perspective on this stuff, and then Warren Beatty was this new sort of like very easygoing, almost questionably heterosexual sort of character, right? So there was a lot of, at least to Jack Warden.
Although the whole big gag, the whole Big Three's Company gag, is that Jack Warden thought he was gay,
right?
For half the movie.
Right. So I guess I feel like there was a lot of discussion about how the idea of what it means to be a man in this situation is evolving, and then there's these two characters that are at opposite ends of what that means, and they're kind of like trying to figure out what that means. Ultimately, they're both really shallow versions of what it means, though. So it's like they're both trying to figure out how to rectify being incredibly shallow about their own masculinity. Sure.
And I think the role of the male is evolving in the 70s, and these films both sort of depict that. The thing that keeps coming to mind is this sort of ennui, for both of them, and sort of like searching for an answer to that, aimlessly searching in some cases. I mean, at least, I feel like George has goals, but he doesn't have ambition. I mean, at least, Tony has some ambition. I would also say that it's almost like the counterpoint to what was going on with the women is, as the women are becoming more openly sexual. I mean, I think Warren Beatty actually has a line in the film, as I recall. I could be remembering it wrong, but doesn't he say, they want you to nail them, but they don't? Yeah. I don't know. I think he says something almost exactly along those lines. And so I mean, there is, It feels like these guys are dogs because women want them to be dogs, and what I mean by dogs, what I'm saying by dogs, like how, only after sex or whatever, they expect that, but frown on it, but they sort of expect it and want it at the same time, and so the 70s male feels confused more than anything else.
Right. Well, I mean, I think because you're talking about this period of time for women to sort of discover their own autonomy about their sexuality. There's a whole section of what it meant to be masculine and male that has to deal with the fact that women might make their own choices. So these guys are both coming from opposite ends of their own masculinity, but they're dealing with the same issue. Whereas women that they're involved with are starting to actually have their own opinion about their sexuality. So they are not used to dealing with that. They're not necessarily used to women having an opinion about this. They're not necessarily used to women being able to be flirty, but also not necessarily want to do everything. So I think they're both trying to. I don't know if the movie's actually trying to say, we understand why men are confused, or if they're laughing at them. So I don't know if it's because of our perspective now, 30, 40 years later, where I saw these men as being just kind of clueless and ridiculous. In the mid-70s, maybe it was much more empathetic for a lot of male audience members to be there.
Well, I would say this. I don't like this movie. I mean, like, I admire some aspects to it, but I don't enjoy watching it. And I feel like my personal issue with it, first of all, I mean, like, I think it's a mess from a screenplay point of view, like, or even not. I just feel like it's coming, like Saturday Night Fever, it tried to take on more than it could handle, and the result is a bit meandering and not as effective as I think it could have been, like, because there are ideas there, and I just wish they picked one or two to focus on. And it feels like, you know, we've already touched on a lot of the ideas. There's so much to talk about, but at the same time, the result is like this hodgepodge that doesn't make for a cohesive, strong narrative to me. And I understand the satirical aspect, but I don't think it is strong in that. I mean, like, I think about a satire, I think about Network. I think that, you know, is a strong satire. But I don't think this hits the mark for me. But with that said, it's time to move on to our classic movie, Showdown. So as you may recall, we have these brackets, like the NCAA brackets. I'll have graphics to show you a little bit later. Where we put pit these movies against one another. Before we go on, it is our tradition to show the classic movie rules. But to make things a little different, I'm going to let Davie Joe narrate what the rules are. Davie Joe, tell us about the classic movie Showdown rules.
All right, you're
summarize.
Yeah. All right. So you're gonna put them on the screen there for me, or okay. So the seating criteria varies from bracket to bracket. The films are 15 years or older. They need to be at least 15 years or older. Voters are eligible if they see both films within a 12-month period. They must watch the movie in JB's presence. JB is ineligible to vote unless, of course, the vote matters, and then he can vote. So, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well done, Davie Joe. J Money, you proud of him?
I'm very proud of him. He can read.
Our little boy's growing up. All right, so this week we're on this. Where'd it go? I had it and then I lost it. This week we're on the 70s bracket.
I was on the radio for a short time in my life.
What's that?
I like read stuff on the radio.
You remember books?
Oh, okay.
You remember books on the radio?
And you actually made money doing that. Anyway, we're on the 70s bracket here. Shampoo's a 12 seed, and as you can see, it goes up against number 5 seed. Blazing Saddles is the 5 seed. So, as you can imagine, at when we had the vote back in July, it made for a very interesting discussion. Do you guys like Blazing Saddles, J Money?
Yes.
Okay.
I like it.
Davie Joe?
I like it. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I like it.
Okay, well, you guys, if you were part of this vote, what would you have voted on, Davie?
Blazing Saddles, probably.
And why?
I remember it being funnier. And it's a comedy, so that's.
But very different. It's a very different kind of comedy. Like, again, as J Money said, we don't necessarily measure Shampoo again, like, by laughs. It's not a laugh-o-meter contest.
No, but Blazing Saddles is, and for it to it hits the mark in that regard. So it's pretty successful. Shampoo, I like Shampoo, and I think it's a fun movie in the sense that the way the characters are moved around and they all kind of collide in interesting ways. But Blazing Saddles is, I think, more of an overall success in its goal.
J Money?
It's funny because I've been thinking about this since I found out the bracket because obviously I get it a little bit earlier, and I've been trying to figure out where I would fall on the scale because in some ways I like Blazing Saddles a fair amount. I think it's a relatively funny movie. I think that there are some really great standout scenes that are really iconic at this point. But I also think it's a movie that doesn't quite hold up after all these years. I think it's a movie that there are parts of it that don't quite translate to modern audiences, and it's partly because things have changed in some ways, have progressed, and I think it's partly because tastes have progressed. And it's because comedy is an organic thing that changes anyway. So in some ways, I actually thought that watching Shampoo, it maybe held up better for me. I mean, I've never seen it before, so it's really hard for me to make that kind of claim. But ultimately, it felt like there were more things happening in Shampoo that felt more relevant to me now than maybe Blazing Saddles does now. Having said that, Blazing Saddles is a far more, I think, important film and far more influential, so I would probably give it to Blazing Saddles in the end.
Wow, there was a back and forth and back again. What? Why is it more important?
I think it's a film that I think it's much more recognizable. I think a lot of people refer to Blazing Saddles. I don't think people watch it that much necessarily anymore, or maybe they talk about watching it. But I guess I feel like there are a lot of really, like I was saying before, iconic scenes in the movie. I think there's a lot of important things that happen in the movie that are people talk about because it's so out there talking about racial issues.
So it's more important because it's talking about racial issues versus the sexual politics of Shampoo?
I think that the way that it was presented seemed maybe more, I don't want to say shocking, but maybe much more straightforward, or maybe much more, I don't know. To me, like, Blazing Saddles isn't so much, I'm trying to figure out the right words to say this. It's not so much a satire. It's satirical. There's definitely a parody aspect of it, but it to me...
I mean, I think satires and parodies are different things.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that Shampoo is trying to be something bigger, and it has a lot of ideas, like you're saying, and maybe it doesn't quite hit them all. Blazing Saddles, I think, is about something very specific, and actually handles the subject very well. And because that has become iconic, even if I think that the jokes in modern times don't quite land as well as they probably did, 40 years ago. So because of that, I think that Blazing Saddles ends up being more important.
We went to a screening at Eat See Here, which is an outdoor movie thing in Los Angeles, and that was last August that we had gone to see it. And we watched it. It actually rained that night in Los Angeles, so it didn't really come down to the movie was just ending. So that's what I remember about that night. But I do feel like the jokes held up. I mean, it's not necessarily my favorite Mel Brooks film. But I do think that it when it hit good. It hit strong.
Maybe I've just never seen it with the right audience, or maybe I've just never seen it in the right place to begin with. I've always seen it. I've seen it 3 times, and I think that the first time I saw it when I was much younger, I didn't really laugh at all. And I think that that's probably because it just wasn't landing for me in terms of the jokes, partly because I didn't necessarily know how to deal with the way that racism was so directly talked about on screen. I think it was really the first time I ever saw that. Right,
but you were also an idiot as a child. Don't forget.
Yeah, I mean, I really, honestly, I was completely, deaf and mute for a number of years. So, it's amazing today where I am, right? But I think that I just, I didn't quite know what to make of it when I saw it the first time. Every time since then I've seen it, it feels like I appreciate it more, and I see the humor, but I don't necessarily find it humorous as much.
But you did give the vote to Blazing Saddles.
I did, because I think ultimately it's a more important movie, and I think that it's probably it's a movie that I think that is.
Is it a better movie? I mean, I think that's what we're evaluating here. It's not necessarily what other.
But there's a lot of different ways that come to my conclusion about what should win. I mean, it's like if things tie up to a certain point, then you pick the thing that you think is the more important of the two, and that's.
Well, I mean, I think that's the whole point of the bracket is to dispel some of these myths potentially. Like films that have lasted, may not be as strong. I mean, we've had plenty of upsets, even on the ones we've talked about in our 17 episodes. We've had plenty of surprises. We had Pinocchio beat The Great Dictator. Do you feel like Pinocchio is a more important film?
I feel like The Great Dictator is more important. I would not have gone in that direction with that vote.
Okay, but I mean, I guess my point is, in fairness, because these films are important for different reasons. So, I mean, absolutely, you're right. Your criteria is your own. But just to make the point that the bracket is not intended to. I mean, the seating, the importance is reflected in the seating, like the lasting power is reflected in the seating, SEEDING. But the choices should be about what is the better film in spite of the importance, whether Blazing Saddles is a 5 seed because of its box office appeal, one of the highest grossing films of the 70s. I mean, and nominated for some Oscars too. I mean, I'm not knocking Blazing Saddles. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate or talk you out of anything. I'm just, from what I'm hearing, it just sounds like you're choosing Blazing Saddles because of its legacy and not necessarily because of its strength. Because
I'm trying to pick out what is the tiebreaker for me. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I might put these movies together in the same level in terms of my enjoyment.
Right. Fair enough.
So for me, I think it says something, for instance, that I've always respected Blazing Saddles because I've always been told since I was even before I even saw it that it was a very important, influential movie. And Shampoo, I was always told, was kind of this fluff piece from the 70s. So, there again, I'm already kind of biased about this stuff,
Right, and like Blazing Saddles probably wound up a little lighter than you expected, and this wound up a little heavier than you expected, and they meet in the middle, I suppose. At our vote back in July, it was actually unanimous. And here you see I hope you will see the winner. Did it come up? Yeah, there it is. So yeah, I mean, the group agreed more with Davie Joe than with J Money. I mean, like, and everyone loved it. It wasn't even like a contest. Like, sometimes there's some intense discussion. J Money, you've been in some intense discussions and votes in New York, but this one was one that there wasn't. I thought that Shampoo might have had a chance. Before I saw how negatively people reacted to it at that particular screening. You guys both liked the film a lot more than anybody else there. And those people that came back to me and said they liked it more after thinking about it for a week, I think, again, what they're liking about it is the ideas and not the execution. I think that is a big part of it. And I know some of you that are at the screen, I think you're watching now, so again, feel free to chime in. I keep looking and refreshing to see if your comments are coming in. I'm talking to you. So far no comments, but I know you guys are watching and I appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying it, and I look forward to hearing, if not publicly, I look forward to hearing what you guys are saying, say to me privately about both the show and Shampoo and Blazing Saddles. So yeah, Blazing Saddles moves on in the 70s bracket, Shampoo is eliminated. So anyway, that's the brackets. How do you guys feel?
Feel good.
What was that gong? Did I hear a gong?
It's like it was announced. Davie Joe entered the room and there was an announcement. That seems right. Like I was saying, it seems right that Blazing Saddles should come out on top in that situation.
Yeah. So next, I'm trying to think of how to introduce next week's classic. The next show is going to be on October 21st, so we're about it's full month before our next show, guys. And our classic film is also from the 70s. Trying to think if I don't know what I could say trivia-wise to sort of hint at it. I will say that something interesting about next week's the next classic that we have. I don't know if you guys saw this in your email, but it actually has 3 brackets. So next time we're going to have 3 of these discussions, which is going to be really kind of fun and interesting.
Great.
And one of the brackets is going to be determined by J Money.
Okay.
So yeah, that'll be fun. So anyway, that's what we got coming up. Coming up in about 7 minutes is our Sound Off, a new segment that we started last time. I think our last episode was August 31st. And so our Sound Off is our free-form segment in which we talk about, which Davie Joe basically talks for a while, and then afterwards I do. We brought the top 5 back. So tonight I'm going to do a top 5 on gangster movies, the top 5 gangster movies of all time. That's coming up on our Sound Off in about 6 minutes now. We'll see you then.